Jacob's life is a powerful tale filled with faith, trickery, and second chances, one that still speaks to us today. In a world where cleverness often wins over honesty, his story makes us reflect on human flaws and how a higher purpose can still shine through them. Have you ever thought about how an imperfect person could be part of a divine plan? Get ready to discover a story that questions what we think about fairness and forgiveness, and learn how a great nation began in an unexpected way. In Genesis 25:21, we meet a couple going through a hard time. Isaac prayed to God for his wife because she couldn't have children. God heard him, and Rebekah finally became pregnant. Back then, not being able to have children was considered a shame, and Rebekah lived with this pain for 2 decades. Think of how hopeless they must have felt, descendants of Abraham, who had received God's promise, yet still childless. Even though God answered Isaac's prayer, the situation was far from simple. In Genesis 25:22-23, we learn that the babies were struggling inside Rebekah, and she asked, "Why is this happening to me?" She went to ask God what was going on. He told her, "There are 2 nations inside you. They will become 2 separate peoples. One will be stronger, and the older will serve the younger." This pregnancy wasn't just a physical struggle, it was a sign of the conflict that would shape both her children's futures and the nations that came from them. God's message turned normal expectations upside down. The younger would lead, not the older. Even before they were born, God was setting up a plan that went against common beliefs. Genesis 25:24-26 describes how the birth happened. When it was time, Rebekah had twin boys. The first one came out red and very hairy, so they named him Esau. His brother came out holding on to Esau's heel, and they named him Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when they were born. From the moment they were born, it was clear they were very different. Esau, born first, had a wild look and would grow into a bold, impulsive man. Jacob, who held his brother's heel as he came out, already showed signs of being clever and determined. As they got older, the differences between them grew stronger. In Genesis 25:27-28, it says Esau became an expert hunter who loved the outdoors. Jacob preferred a quiet life and stayed around the tents. Isaac liked Esau because he enjoyed eating wild meat, but Rebekah favored Jacob. Esau turned into the classic outdoorsman, brave and skilled. Jacob, more peaceful and home-centered, lived differently. Even their parents took sides, each connecting more with one son than the other. Isaac had a special bond with Esau, while Rebekah felt closer to Jacob. This favoritism in the family planted the early signs of conflict, highlighting a powerful truth. When parents treat their children unequally, it can lead to lasting problems. A key moment in the brothers' early years came from what seemed like a small event, but it changed everything. In Genesis 25:29-34, the story tells us that one day, Jacob was making stew when Esau came home from the fields completely exhausted. He said, "Quick, give me some of that red stew, I'm starving." This moment earned him the nickname Edom, which means red. Jacob, spotting an opportunity, answered, "Sell me your rights as the firstborn son first." Esau replied, "I'm about to die. What use is a birthright to me?" Jacob insisted, "Swear to me now." So Esau made an oath and gave up his birthright. Only then did Jacob give him some bread and lentil stew. Esau ate, drank, got up, and walked away, treating his birthright as if it meant nothing. This brief exchange reveals a lot about who the brothers were. Esau acted on impulse, driven by his hunger, and gave up something deeply valuable, a role that held honor, leadership, and a spiritual legacy. His dramatic claim that he was dying shows how easily he gave in to short-term needs. Jacob, on the other hand, was calculating and saw a chance to take something important. Though his actions might seem unfair today, they show his sharp awareness of what the birthright meant, and his readiness to do what was needed to get it. This deal, swapping a priceless role for a simple meal, became a lasting image of Esau's carelessness and Jacob's ambition. The Bible doesn't directly say whether Jacob was right or wrong in that moment, but what follows shows how serious this decision was. The birthright wasn't just about wealth, it included God's blessings and the duty to lead the family's future. By not valuing his birthright, Esau showed he didn't fully understand or care about the promises God had made to his family. For Jacob, this was just the beginning. Getting the birthright marked the start of his quest to become the one chosen to carry on God's covenant. His approach wasn't perfect, but his focus on securing God's blessing would come up again and again in his story. This moment was just the beginning of many more to come. Jacob's cleverness would help him rise, but it would also lead to struggles and danger. His life shows us that even flawed people can be part of a bigger plan, and that our choices can shape much more than just our own future. In Genesis 27, 1-4, we find Isaac in his old age, nearly blind. He called out to his oldest son Esau, saying, "My son." And Esau replied, "Here I am, Father." Isaac said, "I'm getting old, and I don't know how much time I have left. Take your bow and arrows, go out into the fields, and hunt some wild game for me. Then cook it just the way I like and bring it to me. After I eat, I'll give you my blessing before I die." Isaac's age and failing eyesight created a moment filled with urgency and tenderness. He felt his time was coming to an end and wanted to pass on a meaningful blessing to his oldest son. This blessing wasn't just a kind farewell, it carried deep spiritual weight and would shape the future of the one who received it. By planning to bless Esau, Isaac showed he still favored him, even though Esau had once given away his birthright. Maybe Isaac didn't know about that deal between the brothers, or perhaps he didn't think it mattered. Either way, his decision set off a chain of events that would change everything for the family. In Genesis 27, 5-10, we see Rebekah step in with a plan of her own. She overheard Isaac talking to Esau. As soon as Esau left to hunt, she went to Jacob and said, "I just heard your father tell your brother to bring him game and cook him a meal so he can bless him before he dies. Now listen carefully and do what I tell you. Go to the flock and bring me 2 good young goats. I'll make the kind of food your father loves. Then you'll take it to him so he can bless you instead." Rebekah's plan was daring and dangerous. She wasn't just going against Isaac's wishes, she was putting Jacob in a position that could backfire badly. Her reasons were layered. She remembered God's message that the older would serve the younger. She clearly preferred Jacob, and she may have believed that Jacob was better suited to carry on the family's legacy. Cooking the meal was just the beginning. Genesis 27, 11-17 explains how the deception unfolded. Jacob was nervous and said, "But Esau is hairy, and I have smooth skin. If my father touches me, he'll know I'm lying. Instead of a blessing, I'll get a curse." Rebekah replied, "If there's a curse, I'll take it. Just do what I said, go get the goats." Jacob obeyed, and Rebekah made the food just the way Isaac liked it. She then dressed Jacob in Esau's best clothes and covered his hands and neck with goat skins to mimic Esau's hairiness. Finally, she gave him the meal and bread she had prepared to take to his father. This part of the story shows Jacob's worry, not because he thought lying was wrong, but because he feared getting caught. Rebekah's response, taking full responsibility for any consequences, shows her fierce commitment to seeing her plans succeed. The use of Esau's clothes and the goat skins proves just how far they were willing to go to pull off the trick. Genesis 27, 18-29 tells the tense story of Jacob approaching his father. He entered the room and said, "Father?" Isaac responded, "Yes." "Who is it, my son?" Jacob answered, "I'm Esau, your oldest. I did what you asked. Please sit up and eat the food I've brought so you can bless me." Isaac, suspicious, asked, "How did you find the game so quickly, my son?" Jacob replied, "The Lord your God helped me succeed." Isaac said, "Come closer so I can touch you and know whether you really are Esau." At this point, the pressure is clear. Jacob continues to lie, even using God's name to make his story more believable. Isaac senses something is off and insists on feeling Jacob to be sure. In verses 22 to 23, Jacob moved closer. Isaac touched him and said, "The voice sounds like Jacob, but the hands feel like Esau." He couldn't recognize Jacob because of the goat skins on his hands, which felt like Esau's. So Isaac decided to give the blessing. Isaac's senses were in conflict. His hearing recognized Jacob's voice, but his sense of touch convinced him otherwise. Ultimately, he trusted what he felt and moved forward with the blessing. The blessing itself, found in verses 27 to 29, is rich and full of promises. Isaac smelled Jacob's clothes and said, "Ah, the smell of my son is like a field blessed by the Lord. May God give you the dew of heaven and the richness of the earth, plenty of grain and new wine. May other nations serve you and people bow down before you. Be master over your brothers, and may your mother's sons bow to you. May anyone who curses you be cursed, and whoever blesses you be blessed." This blessing wasn't just about wealth or land. It included authority, honor, and a deep spiritual favor. It also fulfilled the earlier prophecy: the older would serve the younger. What happens next, in Genesis 27:30 to 35, is filled with emotion and drama. Just after Jacob left, Esau returned from hunting. He made a meal and brought it to Isaac, saying, "Father, sit up and eat what I've prepared so you can bless me." Isaac asked, "Who are you?" Esau answered, "I'm Esau, your firstborn." Isaac began to tremble uncontrollably. "Then who was it that brought me food? I ate and already gave my blessing, and that blessing will stand." When Esau heard this, he cried out loudly in anguish, "Please, Father, bless me too." But Isaac said, "Your brother tricked me and has taken your blessing." Isaac's reaction, shaking with fear, shows how deeply shaken he was by the truth. Yet his words, "and he will be blessed," show that the blessing, once given, was final. It couldn't be taken back. The blessing Isaac gave wasn't just a father's good wish, it was a prophetic statement shaping the future. Esau's heartbreak is unmistakable in Genesis 27:36 to 38. Esau said, "No wonder his name is Jacob. He's cheated me twice now. First, he took my birthright, and now he's taken my blessing. Don't you have anything left for me?" Isaac replied, "I've made him your master and given him control over all his relatives. I've provided him with grain and wine. What more can I give you, my son?" Still pleading, Esau asked, "Do you have only one blessing, Father? Please bless me too." Then he broke down and cried loudly. Esau's deep pain is clear, and for the first time, he truly realizes what the birthright and blessing meant. His sorrowful request for just one remaining blessing is deeply emotional. Isaac gives him a lesser blessing in Genesis 27:39 to 40. "Your home will be far from the richness of the earth and away from the dew of heaven. You will live by your sword and serve your brother, but one day when you grow restless, you'll break free from his control." This promise is very different from the one Jacob received. It speaks of hardship and conflict, but also holds a hint of future freedom for Esau and his descendants. But Esau's sorrow quickly turns to rage. Genesis 27:41 tells us he bore a deep grudge against Jacob for stealing the blessing. He thought to himself, After my father dies and I've mourned him, I'll kill my brother Jacob." This threat shows how serious Esau's anger had become. Jacob's life was now in danger, and something had to be done immediately. In Genesis 27:42-45, Rebekah takes action once again. When she heard about Esau's plan, she warned Jacob, "Your brother wants to kill you. Now listen, run to my brother Laban in Haran. Stay with him until Esau calms down and forgets what happened. When it's safe, I'll send for you to come back. Why should I lose both of you in a single day?" Rebekah's quick thinking saves Jacob once more. She wasn't just protecting him from harm. She also knew the importance of keeping the family line alive through Jacob, the chosen one. Her final words reveal a mother's fear, not only for Jacob's safety, but also for what would happen to Esau if he followed through with his deadly plan. Jacob's journey to Haran, which begins in Genesis 28:1-5, opens a brand new chapter in his story. Isaac called Jacob and gave him another blessing. This time he also gave him instructions. "Don't marry a Canaanite woman. Go quickly to Paddan Aram, to your grandfather Bethuel's home. Find a wife from the daughters of your uncle Laban, your mother's brother. May God Almighty bless you, make you fruitful, and give you many descendants, so that you become a large people. May he give you the same blessing he gave to Abraham, so you and your children can take possession of the land where you now live as a foreigner, the land God gave to Abraham." So Jacob set out for Paddan Aram, going to Laban, the son of Bethuel the Aramean, Rebekah's brother. This moment is important because Isaac now knowingly blesses Jacob, showing that he has accepted what happened. Rather than clinging to what he wanted, Isaac aligns himself with God's plan. He also stresses the need to keep the family line pure by marrying someone from their people, not from the surrounding nations. And so Jacob leaves. Behind him is a broken home, an angry brother and a mother who sent him away for his own safety. But this journey is about more than avoiding danger. It marks the beginning of Jacob's personal transformation. Along the way, his experiences will reshape him into the man who will later be known as Israel, the father of a great nation. The story of his deceit and escape reminds us that even when our actions are driven by fear or selfish goals, they can still be woven into something greater. It also shows how our choices can affect others for years, especially in close relationships. In Genesis 28:10-11, Jacob begins his journey. He left Beersheba and headed for Haran. One night, after traveling some distance, he stopped because the sun had set. He picked a stone, placed it under his head, and lay down to sleep. Picture Jacob in this moment, alone for the first time, far from home, lying under the night sky with only a rock for a pillow. It's in this moment of isolation and weakness that God reveals himself in an extraordinary dream. Genesis 28:12-15 describes what Jacob saw. He dreamed of a stairway that reached from the ground up to heaven, with angels moving up and down on it. At the top stood the Lord, who spoke to him. "I am the Lord, the God of your grandfather Abraham and your father Isaac. I will give this land where you're lying to you and your descendants. They will become as numerous as the dust of the earth and will spread in every direction, west, east, north, and south. Through your family, all the nations on earth will be blessed. I am with you. I will protect you wherever you go and will bring you back to this land. I won't leave you until I've done everything I promised." This dream, sometimes called Jacob's Ladder, is a vivid picture of the link between heaven and earth. It shows that God is near, even in lonely or uncertain moments. In this vision, God personally confirms the promises once given to Abraham and Isaac, now passing them directly to Jacob. In Genesis 28:16-22, we see a turning point in Jacob's spiritual journey. When he woke up from his dream, he said, "Surely the Lord is here, and I didn't even realize it." He was filled with awe and fear, saying, "This place is amazing. It must be the house of God, the very gate to heaven." Early the next morning, Jacob took the stone he had used as a pillow and stood it upright as a marker. He poured oil on it to set it apart. He named the place Bethel, which means house of God, though it had previously been called Luz. Then Jacob made a vow, "If God stays with me on this journey, provides me with food and clothing, and brings me back safely to my family, then he will be my God. This stone I've set up will be a symbol of his house, and I will give back to him 1/10 of everything he gives me." This moment marks a deep shift in Jacob's faith. For the first time, he personally accepts God, not just as the God of his ancestors, but as his own. It's the beginning of a true relationship with the divine. Jacob's journey continues in Genesis 29, 1 through 12, where he arrives in Haran and meets Rachel in a scene filled with significance. He traveled on until he reached a region in the east. There he saw a well in a field, with 3 flocks of sheep resting nearby. A large stone covered the well, and it was custom to wait until all the flocks had arrived before removing the stone and watering the animals. Jacob approached the shepherds and asked, "My brothers, where are you from?" "We're from Haran," they answered. "Do you know Laban, Nahor's grandson?" Jacob asked. "Yes, we do," they replied. "Is he doing well?" Jacob continued. "He's fine," they said, "and look, his daughter Rachel is coming now with the sheep." Jacob noticed the sun was still high and said, "It's not yet time to bring in the flocks. Why not water the sheep and let them go back to pasture?" But the shepherds answered, "We can't until everyone is here. Once all the flocks are gathered, we roll the stone away and water them." While they were still talking, Rachel arrived with her father's sheep. She worked as a shepherd. As soon as Jacob saw her, his cousin, the daughter of his uncle Laban, he stepped forward, rolled the heavy stone away from the well, and watered Laban's sheep. Then, overcome with emotion, Jacob kissed Rachel and began to cry. He told her who he was, Rebekah's son, her relative. Rachel ran to tell her father the news. Jacob's meeting with Rachel at the well mirrors earlier moments in his family's story, like when Abraham's servant met Rebekah in a similar way. This connection emphasizes how important these water well encounters are in the narrative of God's promises. Jacob's act of moving the heavy stone by himself shows not only his strength, but also his eagerness to impress Rachel. Genesis 29, 13-14 describes a warm welcome. As soon as Laban heard that his sister's son had arrived, he rushed out to meet him. He hugged him, kissed him, and brought him home. Jacob told him everything that had happened. Laban responded, "You are my own flesh and blood." But that warm greeting quickly turned into a business arrangement. In Genesis 29:15-20, Laban said, "Just because you're family doesn't mean you should work for nothing. Tell me what you want as payment." Laban had 2 daughters, Leah, the older, and Rachel, the younger. Leah had soft or weak eyes, while Rachel was beautiful in form and appearance. Jacob had fallen in love with Rachel. He said, "I'll work 7 years for you if you'll give me Rachel as my wife." Laban agreed, saying, "It's better she marries you than a stranger. Stay and work with me." So Jacob worked for 7 years to earn Rachel's hand, but because of his deep love for her, the time flew by and felt like only a few days. This deal shows both Jacob's passion for Rachel and Laban's crafty approach to family dealings. It's also rich in irony. Jacob, who once used deceit to take something that wasn't his, now patiently serves for years to win the woman he loves. But things don't go as planned. In Genesis 29:21 through 25, Jacob finally said to Laban, "My time is up. Give me my wife so we can be together." Laban organized a wedding celebration and invited everyone, but that night he secretly brought Leah to Jacob, and Jacob slept with her, not realizing the switch. Laban also gave Leah a servant named Zilpah as a maid. When Jacob woke up the next morning and saw Leah, he was shocked. He asked Laban, "What have you done? I worked for Rachel. Why did you trick me?" This moment is full of irony. Years earlier, Jacob had fooled his blind father in the dark. Now, in the darkness of his wedding night, he is the one being deceived. His question to Laban, "Why have you deceived me?" echoes what Esau might have said to him long ago. In Genesis 29:26-30, Laban explained, "In our culture, we don't marry off the younger daughter before the older. Finish Leah's wedding week, and then I'll give you Rachel too, if you agree to work another 7 years." Jacob followed through with Laban's conditions. He completed Leah's bridal week, and then Laban gave him Rachel as well. Rachel was also given a servant, Bilhah, to accompany her. Jacob slept with Rachel too, and it was clear he loved her more than Leah. He agreed to work another 7 years for Laban. Now married to both sisters, Jacob found himself in a difficult situation, one that would bring years of tension. His preference for Rachel echoed the same kind of favoritism his parents had shown, continuing a pattern of family conflict. As time passed, children were born into this complicated household. In Genesis 29:31 through 35 and 31 through 24, Leah had the first children, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. Meanwhile, Rachel was unable to conceive. Desperate to give Jacob a child, she offered her servant Bilhah, who bore 2 sons, Dan and Naphtali. Leah, seeing she was no longer having children, gave her servant Zilpah to Jacob. Zilpah gave birth to Gad and Asher. Leah later had 2 more sons, Issachar and Zebulun. Eventually, Rachel herself conceived and gave birth to Joseph. This entire chapter is marked by rivalry. Each woman competed for Jacob's attention and hoped to win his love through motherhood. The names they gave their sons often reflected how they felt or what they were hoping for, longing, gratitude, or a sense of victory. During these years in Haran, Jacob transformed from a single young man into the leader of a large, complicated family. He endured deception, worked hard, and lived through emotional challenges, all while witnessing the early stages of God's promise coming true. He was becoming the father of a great people. In Genesis 30:25-28, Jacob finally expressed his desire to return home. After Joseph was born, he said to Laban, "Let me go back to my homeland. Give me my wives and children for whom I have worked, and I'll leave. You know how much I've done for you." But Laban didn't want to lose him. "If I've found favor with you, please stay," he said. "I've learned through signs that the Lord has blessed me because of you. Just name your price, and I'll pay it." This shows how much Laban had come to rely on Jacob, not just as family, but as the source of his growing wealth. Laban didn't want to let him go. In Genesis 30:39-43, Jacob made an offer that seemed to put him at a disadvantage. He would only take the speckled and spotted animals from Laban's flocks. But through careful breeding techniques and possibly divine help, Jacob's herds multiplied and he became very wealthy. That success didn't go unnoticed. In Genesis 31:1-3, Laban's sons began to complain, "Jacob has taken all our father's wealth." Jacob saw that Laban's attitude toward him had changed as well. Then God spoke to Jacob, "Return to the land of your fathers and your family. I will be with you." In Genesis 31, 4-13, Jacob quietly called Rachel and Leah to the fields and explained everything. He shared how their father's attitude had shifted, how he had worked faithfully, and how God had appeared to him in a dream, telling him it was time to leave. Jacob's wives supported his decision to leave, agreeing that their father had treated them unfairly. In Genesis 31:17-21, we read how Jacob acted during a time when Laban was distracted by shearing his sheep. Jacob placed his children and wives on camels and gathered all his possessions, livestock and goods he had gained in Paddan Aram. With everything he owned, he set out for Canaan, aiming to return to his father Isaac. While this was happening, Rachel secretly took her father's household idols. Jacob, without saying a word to Laban, slipped away quietly. He crossed the Euphrates and headed toward the hill country of Gilead. Rachel's decision to steal the family idols adds a layer of mystery. It may suggest that despite everything, she wasn't entirely ready to break ties with her past or her father's household. In Genesis 31:22-25, we see Laban's response. On the third day, he learned Jacob had left. Furious, he gathered his relatives and chased Jacob for a full week, finally catching up with him in the hills of Gilead. That night, before reaching Jacob, Laban had a dream. In it, God warned him, "Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, good or bad." By the time Laban arrived, Jacob had already set up camp. Laban and his group made camp nearby. This divine message shows once again that God was actively protecting Jacob, even though Jacob had left without notice and Rachel had stolen from her father. The confrontation happens in Genesis 31:26-42. Laban demanded answers, asking why Jacob had left in secret and taken his daughters like captives. He also accused Jacob of stealing his household gods. Jacob, unaware of what Rachel had done, invited Laban to search everything. Rachel, hiding the idols under her seat, claimed she couldn't stand up because of her monthly period. Laban never found the stolen items. Then Jacob, frustrated, let out his anger. "I've served you for 20 years. None of your animals miscarried, and I never ate from your flock. If something was killed by wild animals, I covered the loss myself. I worked through burning heat by day and freezing cold by night. Sleep often escaped me. I spent 14 years working for your daughters and 6 years for your flocks. You changed my wages 10 times. If it weren't for the God of my father, the God of Abraham and the one Isaac feared, you would have sent me away with nothing. But God saw my suffering and hard work. That's why he confronted you last night." This passionate speech reflects how Jacob felt deeply wronged and misunderstood. He believed that despite Laban's tricks, God had stood by him and made things right. After this, a peace agreement was made in Genesis 31:43-55. To seal the covenant, they built a mound of stones as a sign of their promise not to harm each other. Laban named it Jegar Sahadutha in Aramaic, and Jacob called it Galid in Hebrew, both meaning witness pile. Finally, in Genesis 31:55, we see the emotional farewell. Early in the morning, Laban kissed his daughters and grandchildren and gave them his blessing. Then he left, and the two groups went their separate ways. Jacob then departed and went back to his homeland. With this goodbye, an important phase in his life came to a close. He wasn't the young man who had once fled. Now he was the leader of a large and thriving family. Genesis 32:1-2 briefly describes a spiritual moment when Jacob continued on his journey and encountered God's angels. Upon seeing them, he said, "This must be God's camp," and he named the place Mahanaim. This event reminded Jacob that God was still with him, watching over him and preparing him for what lay ahead. In Genesis 32:3-21, Jacob begins getting ready to meet Esau. He sends messengers ahead to announce his return. But when they come back with news that Esau is approaching with 400 men, Jacob becomes deeply afraid. To protect his family, he divides them into two groups, thinking, if Esau attacks one group, maybe the other can escape. Terrified, Jacob turns to God in prayer. God of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, you told me to return to my land and my family, promising to bless me. I don't deserve the love and loyalty you've shown. When I crossed the Jordan River, I had nothing but a staff. Now I've grown into two camps. Please rescue me from Esau. I fear he'll attack me, the mothers and the children. But you promised to bless me and make my descendants as countless as the sand on the shore. This heartfelt prayer shows Jacob's deep fear mixed with his trust in God's promises. He knows he's not perfect, yet he clings to God's word. Hoping to soften Esau's heart, Jacob also sends generous gifts in waves, hoping that this offering will calm his brother's anger. And so, his preparations for a meeting he has feared for 20 years are complete. The man who once ran away in fear is now returning with wealth and responsibility, but still carrying the weight of past choices and holding on to his faith. Genesis 32:22 through 32 recounts one of the most mysterious and powerful moments in Jacob's story, his struggle with a divine being at Peniel. That night, Jacob got up, took his wives, servants, and 11 sons, and led them across the Jabbok River. After sending them and all his belongings ahead, Jacob stayed behind alone. There, a man wrestled with him all night until sunrise. This intense struggle reflected Jacob's inner turmoil, facing both who he had been and who he was becoming. When the man realized he couldn't overpower Jacob, he touched his hip, dislocating it. He then said, "Let me go. It's almost morning." But Jacob refused. "I won't let go unless you bless me," he insisted. "What's your name?" the man asked. "Jacob," he replied. "From now on," the man said, "you'll be called Israel, because you've struggled with both God and people and have prevailed." This name change signaled a deep transformation. Jacob was no longer the one who deceived. Now he was someone who wrestled with the divine and endured. He left that night marked by the blessing, but also physically changed, walking with a limp as a sign of the encounter. Jacob's injury remained as a lasting sign of his extraordinary encounter with God. Soon after, the long-dreaded meeting with his brother finally took place, as told in Genesis 33:1 through 11. Looking up, Jacob saw Esau coming toward him with 400 men. In response, Jacob organized his family, placing the maids and their children in front, then Leah and her children, and finally Rachel with Joseph at the rear. He himself moved ahead of them and bowed low to the ground 7 times as he approached Esau. This careful approach and repeated bowing showed Jacob's humility and his hope for peace. But what followed was completely unexpected. Esau rushed to meet Jacob, hugged him tightly, kissed him, and they both wept. This reunion was powerful. Esau's warm welcome and tears made it clear that the anger of the past had faded. Their conversation also reflected their mutual generosity. Though Esau initially declined Jacob's offering, Jacob urged him to accept it, saying, "Please take this gift. It's a sign of God's kindness to me. I have more than enough." After this heartfelt reunion, the brothers parted on good terms. Genesis 33:16-17 explains that Esau returned to Seir, while Jacob continued to Succoth. There he settled down, built a house, and put up shelters for his animals. This is how the area came to be known as Succoth. Jacob's stay in Succoth and later his move to Shechem marked a fresh stage in his journey. Genesis 33:18-20 tells us that after arriving safely in Shechem, coming from Paddan Aram, Jacob camped near the city. He bought a piece of land from the sons of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 silver coins and pitched his tent there. Jacob then built an altar and named it El Elohe Israel, honoring God. But the peace he found in Shechem was short-lived. Genesis 34 recounts a painful event involving his daughter Dinah. Dinah, the daughter of Leah, went out to meet the local women. While she was there, Shechem, the son of Hamor and a local ruler, saw her, took her, and raped her. Despite this, Shechem became infatuated with Dinah and asked his father to arrange a marriage with her. But the damage had already been done, and Jacob's sons, especially Simeon and Levi, were furious. They began to plan revenge for the dishonor brought upon their sister. Simeon and Levi tricked the men of Shechem by agreeing to the marriage on one condition: that every male in the city be circumcised. The Shechemites accepted, but while they were still sore and recovering, Simeon and Levi launched a brutal attack. They killed every man in the city. Jacob was horrified by what they had done. In Genesis 34:30, he tells them, "You've caused me great trouble. Now the Canaanites and Perizzites, the people who live here, will hate us. We are few, and if they unite against us, my whole household could be wiped out." After this violent event, God tells Jacob to move to Bethel. In Genesis 35:2-3, Jacob gathers his family and says, "Get rid of all the foreign gods you have with you. Purify yourselves and change your clothes. Let's go to Bethel. There I will build an altar to the God who helped me in my darkest moments and who has stayed with me wherever I've gone." At Bethel, God once again speaks to Jacob, confirming the promises made long ago. In Genesis 35:10-12, God says, "Your name is Jacob, but from now on you will be called Israel." God then blesses him, saying, "I am the Almighty God, have many children, a nation and many nations will come from you. Even kings will be among your descendants. The land I gave to Abraham and Isaac, I now give to you and your children after you." While continuing the journey from Bethel toward Ephrath, Rachel goes into labor. Genesis 35:16-20 describes how, as they neared Ephrath, Rachel's labor became extremely painful. During the delivery, the midwife tried to comfort her, saying, "Don't be afraid, you have another son." But Rachel was dying. With her last breath, she named the baby Ben-Oni, which means son of my sorrow, but Jacob later called him Benjamin. Rachel passed away and was buried along the road to Ephrath, now known as Bethlehem. Her death was a heartbreaking moment for Jacob and marked the loss of someone deeply loved. As if that grief weren't enough, Jacob faces yet another painful event. In Genesis 35:22, it's briefly mentioned that while they were staying in the region, Reuben, Jacob's eldest son, slept with Bilhah, his father's concubine. Jacob found out. Though no details are given, this act would later affect Reuben's standing in the family and cost him his birthright. Despite these painful events, this chapter in Jacob's life reflects a mixture of spiritual awakening and personal sorrow. He finds peace with God and returns to his family, but not without loss and betrayal. Genesis 35:27 tells us that Jacob finally came home to his father Isaac at Mamre, near Kiriath Arba, also called Hebron, where both Abraham and Isaac had once lived. Jacob's journey comes full circle as he returns home, reconnecting with the place where it all began. In Genesis 35:28-29, we read about the passing of Isaac. He lived to be 180 years old, then died peacefully, having lived a long and full life. His sons, Esau and Jacob, came together once more to bury him, briefly reunited in their grief. From here, the focus of the story shifts to Joseph, the son Jacob loved most. Genesis 37:3-4 tells us that Israel, as Jacob is now called, loved Joseph more than his other sons because Joseph had been born during his old age. To show this affection, he gave Joseph a special robe, often described as richly decorated or multicolored. This clear favoritism didn't go unnoticed. Joseph's brothers saw how much their father favored him and grew to hate him. They couldn't even speak kindly to him. This family tension echoed Jacob's own childhood when he too had been the favorite, his mother's favorite son. Things got worse when Joseph began sharing his dreams. In Genesis 37:5-11, he described one dream in which his bundle of grain stood upright while his brothers' bundles bowed to it. In another, the sun, moon, and 11 stars bowed down to him. These dreams only increased his brother's resentment. Even Jacob scolded him for the second dream, though he quietly kept it in mind. What they didn't realize was that these dreams hinted at Joseph's future role in saving them. Then came a turning point in the story, when Joseph's brothers betrayed him. In Genesis 37:18-20, they saw him coming from a distance and began to plot. "Here comes that dreamer," they said. "Let's kill him and throw him into a pit. We'll tell everyone a wild animal got him. Then we'll see what becomes of his dreams." But Reuben stepped in to protect him. As Genesis 37:21-22 explains, Reuben told them not to kill Joseph. "Don't harm him," he said. "Just throw him into this pit in the wilderness." He said this because he planned to come back later and rescue Joseph, returning him safely to their father. Before Reuben could carry out his plan, Judah offered another idea. In Genesis 37:26-28, Judah said, "What's the point of killing our brother and hiding it? Let's sell him to those Ishmaelite traders instead. He is our brother, after all." The others agreed. So when a group of Midianite merchants passed by, they pulled Joseph from the pit and sold him for 20 pieces of silver. The traders took Joseph to Egypt. To cover their betrayal, the brothers devised a lie. Genesis 37:31-33 recounts how they took Joseph's special robe, killed a goat, and dipped the robe in its blood. Then they brought it to their father and said, "We found this. Please look. Does it belong to your son?" Jacob immediately recognized it. "It's my son's robe," he said. Jacob was devastated. "Some wild animal has surely torn him apart," he cried. Believing Joseph to be dead, his grief was overwhelming. Genesis 37:34-35 tells us that Jacob tore his clothes, wore sackcloth, and mourned his son for many days. Though his sons and daughters tried to comfort him, he refused their help. "I will grieve for my son until I die," he said. So Jacob wept deeply, locked in sorrow. His heartbreak over Joseph lasted for years, casting a long shadow over his life. He had no idea that his beloved son was still alive. Later, during a time of severe famine in Canaan, the story takes a new turn. In Genesis 42:1-2, Jacob learns there is food available in Egypt. He tells his sons, "Why are you just standing around? I've heard there's grain in Egypt. Go there and buy some so we don't starve." That decision sets off a chain of events that will eventually lead to an unexpected family reunion. But first, new troubles arise. In Egypt, Simeon is held as a hostage, and the ruler demands they bring their youngest brother Benjamin on their next trip. This puts Jacob in a painful position. In Genesis 42:36, Jacob says to his sons, "You've taken my children from me. Joseph is gone. Now Simeon is gone. And you want to take Benjamin too. Everything is working against me." His fear of losing Benjamin, the only other son born to Rachel, makes him hesitate. But eventually, the need for food becomes urgent, and Judah steps in. He promises to protect Benjamin, and Jacob finally agrees to let them return to Egypt. In Genesis 43:11-14, Jacob gives instructions and a heartfelt blessing. If it has to be this way, take gifts, some balm, honey, spices, myrrh, pistachios, and almonds. Take double the silver to return what was found in your sacks. It may have been a mistake. And take your brother Benjamin too. Go back to the man quickly. May God Almighty give you mercy, so he lets both your brother and Benjamin return with you. And if I must lose them, then I must. The moment when Joseph finally reveals his identity is one of the most emotional in all of Genesis. In Genesis 45, Joseph tells his stunned brothers who he really is. He then sends them home with a powerful message for their father. Genesis 45:9-11 recounts his words. Go quickly to my father and say, your son Joseph says, God has made me ruler over all Egypt. Come to me without delay. You'll live close to me in the land of Goshen. You, your children, your grandchildren, along with your animals and everything you own. I'll take care of you there because there are still 5 more years of famine ahead. Without help, you and your family could lose everything. When Joseph's brothers told Jacob to move to Egypt, he couldn't believe what he was hearing. As it says in Genesis 45:26-28, they told him, Joseph is alive. He's actually the ruler of all Egypt. But Jacob was in shock and didn't believe them at first. Once they explained everything Joseph had said, and he saw the wagons Joseph had sent for him, Jacob felt his spirit lift again. Then Israel said, It's true. My son Joseph is alive. I must go and see him before I die. Jacob's doubt was understandable. The news was overwhelming. But in Beersheba, he received a message from God, as told in Genesis 46:2-4. God called out to him at night, saying, Jacob, Jacob, and he answered, I'm here. God told him, I am the God of your father. Don't be afraid to go to Egypt. I will turn your family into a great nation there. I will go with you, and I promise to bring you back. Joseph will be with you when your life ends. The trip to Egypt and the emotional reunion with Joseph are detailed in Genesis 46:29-30. Joseph got his chariot ready and traveled to Goshen to meet his father. As soon as he saw him, he hugged him tightly and cried for a long time. Israel said, Now I can die in peace, because I've seen with my own eyes that you're alive. Settling in Goshen marked the final chapter of Jacob's journey. Genesis 47:7-10 shares the moment Jacob met Pharaoh. Joseph introduced his father to the king, and Jacob gave him a blessing. Pharaoh asked, How old are you? Jacob replied, I'm 130 years old. My life has been short and hard compared to my ancestors. Then Jacob blessed Pharaoh again and left. Jacob spent the last 17 years of his life in Egypt, and they were peaceful. As Genesis 47:27-28 says, the Israelites made their home in Goshen. They settled in the land, bought property, and their families grew rapidly. Jacob spent 17 years in Egypt, and he lived to be 147. His final blessings are found in Genesis chapters 48 and 49. Jacob welcomed Joseph's sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, as his own, making them equal to his other sons and future leaders of tribes. In a surprising move, he crossed his arms while blessing them, giving the more significant blessing to the younger, Ephraim. This act reflected his own life story. The blessings he gave to each of his 12 sons, as described in Genesis 49, are full of deeper meaning. Some sons received promises of greatness, while others were warned about their actions. These words would shape the future of each tribe of Israel. Jacob was very clear about where he wanted to be buried. Genesis 49:29 through 32 tells us that he gave this instruction. "I'm about to join my ancestors. Bury me with them in the cave at Machpelah, near Mamre in Canaan. It's the burial place Abraham bought from Ephron the Hittite." He explained that Abraham and Sarah were buried there, along with Isaac and Rebekah, and he had also buried Leah there. Genesis 49:33 to 50:03 tells how, after giving these final words, Jacob laid down, took his last breath, and passed away peacefully. Joseph was heartbroken. He hugged his father, cried over him, and kissed him. Joseph had the royal doctors embalm his father, a process that took 40 days. Then the people of Egypt mourned for Jacob for 70 days, showing great respect. Genesis 57:13 recounts the impressive funeral. Joseph, his brothers, and many Egyptian officials traveled with Jacob's body to Canaan to bury him in the same cave with his ancestors, bringing an honorable close to Jacob's long life. Though his story ended there, Jacob's legacy continued. His life was full of ups and downs, moments of deception, pain, struggle, but also forgiveness and growth. Through it all, God never left him. Jacob's journey shows how even our mistakes and hardships can be part of something bigger. What does Jacob's story mean to you? Have you seen yourself in his journey? If this video made you reflect or inspired you in any way, share it with someone else who might need to hear it. Jacob's life reminds us that anyone can change, and it's never too late for a new beginning. If you liked this video, make sure to subscribe and enable notifications so you won't miss more stories like this. Stories that teach us powerful lessons through the lives of biblical figures. Just like God was present in Jacob's life, he wants to be part of yours too. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.